Hey guys, it's Andrew from Collective Intelligence. Today I'm going to talk to you about why your mixes suck or why you're struggling to make music that translates onto other sound systems. There's many factors that come into play when we're trying to get a really clean and tight mix. But ultimately what you need is trust. You need to trust the environment in which you're listening to, whether that's a room, a set of headphones, or the room with speakers, obviously. Now, this video will talk about tips and tricks for getting everything organized, but it's about trusting what you hear, because once you trust what you can hear, you don't chase your tail so much with referencing tracks on different sound systems and having it sound different, and that frustration that comes from not being able to get it right. When you get a proper studio setup, you can just trust that what you're hearing in the studio will translate outward and work on other sound systems. So let's talk more about that. We want to know whether we can hear a good mix well to start with. We need to know whether our ears are really knowing what to listen for and what sounds good. Typically this is given, but in some circumstances, some people do need to train their ear towards what's better than other, which mixes are better than others. So that could take a little bit of help. So in the video description, I've listed a bunch of reference material that I believe are really good quality mixes. Mainly it's electronic music, but that may serve as a nice little outline or guideline for you. So obviously there's a huge amount of technical knowledge that goes into creating a mix. Now this video is not going to touch on the technical knowledge because I believe that first of all, I've made plenty of videos on that, and there's plenty of videos out there. But what a lot of videos don't touch on, maybe some of the most important parts. And I think that a lot of people avoid talking about them because it sounds almost as though you're talking about buying yourself a better mix. And that's completely not what I'm saying. If you've got a good set of ears and you've got some speakers that you know really well and you trust, then surely you should be able to get a good mix out of them. But if you are mixing in an environment that's not treated, this is the number one problem of having a terrible mix. So my number one tip is going to be to you that you need to lock yourself down a studio space, whether it's in your bedroom or somewhere where you can acoustically treat the space to tighten it up so that you can get more accurate sound reproduction in that area. Now, I'm going to link a video in the description below that will talk you through the simple steps that you can take to treat your room, and it's not expensive at all. For a room this size, I've spent probably about $300 on material. And in the United States or elsewhere, it's likely to be much cheaper than that because you can get resources and materials for cheaper than what it costs here in Australia. So treating your room is essential. Setting your studio up correctly is essential as well. You must form an equilateral triangle between you and the speakers. We're listening to stereo music. The speakers need to be set up in a way where they can create a stereo image in front of you. And if you don't have a stereo image and you don't have left or right, then you're in the dark as to how your mix is going to translate onto other sound systems. So also on that point, people using headphones are not necessarily ideal for mixing. Now, of course, if you've got them and that's all you've got, then that's all that matters. But if you are wanting to achieve a very good mix, headphones do not crosstalk like stereo speakers do. What I mean by that is when the right channel is playing, I have it isolated completely on that side of my head. I do not hear any of the left speaker signal at all, right? So you are getting completely independent speakers for each ear for the panning, and that's not natural. So when you're sitting in a stereo setup, it's ideal to have speakers in front of you because then you can actually get the full sound stage. There are software that will compensate for this with headphones. You can buy software that will provide the artificial crosstalk between the speakers. I haven't used that particular software, so I don't know how well it works, but I'll link that also in the video description below. Now, Speakers obviously are another really big issue, and a lot of entry-level people will buy the brands that market to entry-level and then complain that their mixes aren't very good, and that's because a lot of these speakers are not very accurate. Now, this is a non-judgmental video, so whatever equipment you have, don't be offended if I name a brand or something that I'm sort of calling out. But for example, KRK Rockets, Mackie, entry-level Mackie speakers, I'd say entry-level Presonus as well. I'm not a big fan of them. M Audio, Behringer, like these sorts of entry-level speaker options are not accurate speakers. They're not going to give you a sound that will easily be reproduced elsewhere. And with those quality of speakers on top of an untreated room, then you're going to be constantly chasing your tail. And it's really worthwhile learning a bit about speakers and a bit about your frequency response in different rooms so that you can really help understand what it is you're hearing and how the room is interfering with that, because the room is very important. The physics or the dimensions of your room dictate how the frequencies, especially in the low end, will be produced and how they will be heard. And you'll notice that when you're moving in and out or up and down in a room, bass gets louder and quieter and all this sort of thing. That's because of the room modes and the way that the sine waves or the frequencies are bouncing around. Some are cancelling each other out. And this is really important to learn about. And if you're saying like all of this is too technical for you, then yeah, you really need to defeat that hesitation and get into it, because knowledge is power. And the more that you know, you're not going to be sitting there with all of this information about room acoustics and not be using it with music production. It's part of the deal. So finally, what you can also do, and I will mention some brands that are very accurate too in a moment as well. But what you also can do is you can get a studio measurement microphone. You can actually measure the room, and you can use a free piece of software called Room EQ Wizard, which I'll link in the video description below. But without Room EQ Wizard, you could also use SonarWorks, which I've done a video on, which I'll link in the video below. So SonarWorks will work for headphones as well as speakers. Essentially, with the headphones, what it does is it knows the typical frequency response of the headphones, and it offers an EQ adjustment to balance out those headphones so that they don't have any peaks or troughs cutting out certain parts of the frequency spectrum. In your room, you connect it up to an audio interface, and you use the measurement microphone to, your speakers will play sweeps, frequency sweeps from low to high or high to low, and the microphone will listen to what it can hear, and then it will offer an EQ adjustment for your room. Okay, now it's not a magical solution, it's not perfect, but it's really, really good, and it really helps translate. And as that technology evolves and grows, it's going to get even better. We're going to get very good at reproducing very accurate frequencies in particular spaces. So some brands to look for if you're in the market for headphones or speakers. Headphones, I would suggest AKG or Bad Dynamic. I really like both of them. Sennheiser as well, very good headphones. Those three are the main ones that get talked about from what I can understand. Audio Technica make some okay closed back headphones. The M50X, which I've had for a very long time and I quite like. So that's it for headphones. There are 4 brands to kind of look towards. And then with speaker brands, I really like Neumann. This is a German brand. It's owned by Sennheiser. They manufacture loudspeakers. They do have some more mid-range options as well as high-end options. And I would really suggest their speakers are extremely accurate, and they translate really well. And I'm using the Neumann KH310. You can find that in the video description below as well. I've listed what gear I'm using. And other than that, Adam Audio, Head Audio, Eve Audio, these are all very great manufacturers of loudspeakers designed for studio use. Genelec are very good as well. Focal are quite good. And then in the upper high end, you'd be looking at like ATC, Bigfoot, PSI Audio, Key audio is one to look out for, and Dutch and Dutch. So Key and Dutch are doing very interesting things with digital signal processing in an acoustic space where the speaker is actually actively listening to the room and readjusting its frequency response for the room, similar to what I was talking about with SonarWorks. So that's a very quick look at what sort of things that you can adjust in your environment in order to ensure that your mixes will improve. Because when you can hear what you're doing better, and when you can trust what you can hear in your speaker as how it will sound when it translates, you all of a sudden find that production becomes quite easy, because you just sit things in the mix where they sound right. Of course, you need to still keep learning the technical side of things. You can't skip that part. But these sorts of ideas with room treatment and getting good speakers or good headphones are really going to help you out a lot, and it's helped me out immensely. So I hope this video helps you guys. Take a look in the video description. I'm going to be putting a bunch of links on a lot of things that I mentioned to other YouTube channels that talk about the products or talk about how to treat your room. So check it out. I hope you learn heaps. Take care.